Mia was sitting at the kitchen table, staring absently out the window. Her husband Jaden had already left for work, leaving behind an empty house and a dead silence. Birds were singing outside the window, and it seemed like a warm and sunny day was beginning outside. But Mia was cold inside. The relationship with Jaden has long lost the spark that it had in the beginning. Previously, they could talk for hours about everything in the world, laugh and plan for the future, but now it all seemed far away and unattainable. Jaden was constantly busy with his work, and their evenings together turned into a series of boring routine duties. Mia felt lonely, and their relationship was empty and meaningless. To somehow unwind, Mia decided to spend the day outside the house. She got dressed and headed to the local library, a place where she liked to spend time in silence, surrounded by books. Literature has always been her outlet, a way to escape from reality and immerse herself in worlds where everything is possible. Walking through the library aisles, she stopped in front of a shelf with books on philosophy that she had long wanted to read. She reached out to take one of the books, but at the same moment another hand reached for the book. With a surprised glance, she met the eyes of an elderly man. He was tall and fit despite his age, with short grey hair and warm brown eyes that looked at her with good-naturedness and curiosity.
"I'm sorry. I think I reached for the same book as you."
His voice was deep and calm, with a slight smile.
"Oh no, it's okay. Please take it,"
she replied, feeling the unexpected warmth from his smile. Mia suddenly realized that for the first time in a long time, she was so interested in someone. There was something special about the man, something that attracted her attention. They both held out their hands to the book at the same time and laughed.
"It seems that we have similar tastes in literature,"
he said, and a playful sparkle appeared in his eyes. Mia smiled back.
"Maybe. Do you also like philosophy?"
"Yes, especially books that make you think about life. Sometimes it's useful to stop and reconsider your path, isn't it?"
She was struck by his wisdom, and she felt that she wanted to continue the conversation. "I absolutely agree. Philosophy often helps me understand myself and my feelings." They started a conversation, and it turned out that they had a lot to talk about. Nelson was a widower who had lost his wife a few years ago. His children had long since moved to different cities, and he often spent time in the library so as not to feel lonely. There were years of experience and hardships in his eyes, but there was also something else, a love of life and calmness that immediately attracted Mia to him. They sat down at one of the tables in the reading room and continued the conversation. Mia told him about her hobbies, how she loves to read and write. Nelson listened to her attentively, nodding in time to her words and occasionally inserting his comments.
"And what do you like to read the most?"
she asked, curious to learn more about a new acquaintance.
"I've always gravitated towards autobiographies and memoirs. I like to find out how people cope with life's difficulties, how they grow and change. It reminds me that everyone has their own story and that every life is unique."
His words penetrated her soul. She felt understood, as if she had met a man who shared her views on life. They continued to talk, and time flew by unnoticed. Nelson wasn't just a listener, he was a man who understood her. The time in the library flew by unnoticed, and when they looked at the clock, they realized that several hours had passed. Mia was surprised at how quickly they found common ground. She hadn't felt so alive and inspired in a very long time.
"Time seems to have flown by unnoticed. It was a pleasure talking to you, Mia,"
he said, getting up from the table.
"Me too, Nelson. I hope to see you again."
Her voice sounded sincere, and she hoped that their meeting would not be the last. As they were saying goodbye, Mia found herself looking forward to the next meeting. She didn't know what attracted her to Nelson, but she felt it was more than just a casual acquaintance. His calmness and wisdom made her think about her life and her relationship with Jaden. That evening, Mia couldn't stop thinking about Nelson as she walked home. His eyes, his voice, all this penetrated her thoughts and did not let go. She felt that she had found something in him that she had missed so much in her relationship with Jaden. It was warmth and attention that she had been missing for a long time. Several days had passed, and Mia still couldn't get Nelson out of her mind. She found excuses to go to the library again, hoping to meet him there, and one day her expectations were fulfilled. When she entered the library, she immediately saw him. Nelson was sitting at the same table as when they first met, reading a book. She came up to him, and he looked up when he saw her. His face lit up with a smile, and Mia felt her heart beat faster.
Mia, how nice to see you again.
He said, putting down the book.
I'm glad to see you too, Nelson.
She replied, sitting down at the table. They plunged into conversation again, and Mia felt her soul fill with warmth. Nelson talked about his life, about his late wife, and how they built their lives together. His stories were filled with love and wisdom, and Mia listened to him without taking her eyes off him. Their conversations grew deeper every day. Mia could feel her affection for Nelson growing. He was like a breath of fresh air to her, a man with whom she could be herself without pretending or hiding her thoughts and feelings. One evening, when they were sitting in the library again, Nelson told Mia about his first date with his wife. He described how nervous he was, how he tried to make an impression. Mia smiled, imagining the young Nelson, and felt her heart skip a beat again. She suddenly realized that she was attracted to this man not only by his wisdom and experience, but also by something deeper: his kindness, ability to listen and understand. There was something in him that she had been looking for in her life for a long time and could not find next to Jaden. Every day she became more and more aware that her feelings for Nelson went beyond the usual friendship. She began to dream about him, to think about how wonderful it would be to spend more time with him. But at the same time she felt guilty about Jaden. She knew that her marriage was far from ideal, but she also knew that she was attracted to another man, and that was wrong. However, Mia couldn't resist meeting Nelson. He became her refuge, a place where she could hide from all her problems and worries. They continued to meet in the library, talk and share their thoughts. Their bond grew stronger and stronger, and Mia knew that her feelings for him would not change. She couldn't stop thinking about Nelson, his smile, the way he looked at her. Every time they met, she felt her heart sank. It is filled with joy and warmth. She knew that these feelings were wrong, that she shouldn't have fallen in love with another man, but she couldn't help herself. One evening, when she was returning home after another meeting with Nelson, she realized that she could no longer ignore her feelings. She stopped at the door of her house and felt her heart beating faster. She knew she had to make a decision, but she didn't know what to do. Mia understood that her feelings for Nelson were real and strong, but she also knew that her marriage to Jaden was ruined. She stood on the threshold of her house, feeling her heart being torn apart. She couldn't go back to Jaden, knowing that her heart belonged to another man. She spent sleepless hours thinking that night. She knew she had to make a choice, but this choice was incredibly difficult. She could stay with Jaden, trying to rebuild what had once been between them, or risk everything for her love for Nelson. A few days passed and Mia made a decision. She realized that she could not live in deception and that her heart had already made its choice. She knew she had to be honest with herself and with others. The meeting with Nelson in the library was her last step towards making a decision. When she approached him, her heart was full of determination and confidence. She knew that she had made the right choice and was ready to take a new path, despite all the difficulties and obstacles that could await her ahead. At that moment, she realized that their first meeting was not accidental. She was the beginning of something new and wonderful, something that changed her life forever. Mia knew that there were many challenges ahead, but she also knew that she was ready to go through all this for the sake of the man who had become everything to her. After their first meeting in the library, Mia couldn't stop thinking about Nelson. His calmness, wisdom, and benevolence made a deep impression on her. With each passing day, her thoughts returned more often to their conversation. She remembered how attentively he listened to her, how his eyes shone with sincere interest when she talked about her life and hobbies. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt heard and understood. The next day, she returned to the library. Mia was full of hope to meet Nelson again. She walked between the shelves, glancing at the books, and trying not to look too obvious in her search. And when she almost lost hope, she saw him sitting at the same table with a book in his hands. A warm smile appeared on his face when he noticed her.
Hi, Mia. It's good to see you again.
He said, rising to greet her.
Hello, Nelson. I'm glad too.
She replied, feeling her heart begin to beat faster. She sat down at the table opposite him, and they plunged back into conversation. This time their conversation touched on deeper topics: childhood, life decisions and losses. Nelson told stories about his past, about how he lost his wife a few years ago. He spoke about it with a slight sadness, but also with gratitude for the moments they shared together.
When Liliana and I were young, we had so many plans for the future.
He said thoughtfully, looking out the window.
We dreamed of traveling all over the world, seeing places we had read about in books. But life always makes its own adjustments. When she got sick, everything changed.
Mia listened to him with a sinking heart. There was pain of loss in his voice, but also deep acceptance. She marveled at his resilience and ability to find light in the darkest moments of his life.
It must have been very hard
She said softly, looking at him.
to lose someone you love more than anything in the world.
Yes, it is.
He nodded.
But over time, I've learned to appreciate the moments we had. They became my anchors when everything else seemed to make no sense.
These words touched Mia deeply. She realized that Nelson had taught her an important lesson. Despite the pain and loss, you need to appreciate what you have. His wisdom and ability to find joy in simple things amazed her. With each new visit to the library, their conversations became more frank and in-depth. Nelson shared his thoughts about life, about how important it is to find your place in the world and not be afraid to be yourself. Mia, in turn, talked about her dreams and fears, about how difficult it is for her to find herself in a world where, it would seem, everything is already a foregone conclusion. She told him about her marriage to Jaden, how happy she was at first, but over time their relationship became routine. Jaden was successful in his career, but he didn't give her any time at all. He was completely absorbed in his work and seemed oblivious to her emotional needs.
Sometimes it seems to me that he sees only convenience in me.
She admitted, feeling tears welling up in her eyes.
It's like I'm part of his successful image, but not a person with my own feelings and desires.
It must be very hard.
He said softly.
Everyone deserves to be seen and heard. It's important to find someone who can truly appreciate you.
His words penetrated Mia's very heart. She felt a strange warmth from his understanding and care. Nelson wasn't just listening to her. He really understood her pain and was willing to share it. The time spent with Nelson was her salvation. She began to realize that her feelings for him went beyond the usual friendship. Every time they met, she felt her heart fill with joy and lightness, which she had not experienced for a long time. She liked the way he listened to her, the way his eyes shone with interest when she told him about her hobbies and thoughts. She began to realize that Nelson had filled the void that had formed in her life. He became not only a friend for her, but also a person for whom she began to have deep feelings. These feelings were frightening and exciting at the same time. She knew she had to keep her distance, but she couldn't bring herself to stop seeing him. Every time Mia returned home from meetings with Nelson, she was overcome by conflicting feelings. She felt guilty about Jaden, but at the same time she couldn't deny that she was attracted to Nelson with incredible force. She understood that her marriage had long been a formality, and all she wanted was to feel alive. Mia began to notice that she was thinking more and more about Nelson, remembering their conversations and dreaming about the next meeting. She understood that her affection for him was getting deeper, but she didn't know what to do about it. Her heart beat faster every time she saw him, and she could no longer imagine her life without these meetings. One evening, as she was returning from the library after a particularly long conversation with Nelson, Mia realized that her feelings for him could no longer be ignored. She realized that she was falling in love with him, and this realization stunned her. She couldn't believe that she was attracted to a man who was much older than her, but at the same time she couldn't help herself. Mia began to notice more often that she was looking for something in Nelson that she lacked in her marriage to Jaden. She found in him not only a friend, but also a person with whom she could spend the rest of her life. Her heart was full of contradictions, but one thing she knew for sure: her feelings for Nelson were real and deep. Every day their meetings became more necessary for her. She needed him, his wisdom and warmth. She knew their relationship was wrong, but she couldn't give up on how she felt. Her heart was beating in unison with his, and she knew she couldn't deny her feelings anymore. One evening, when they were sitting in the library again, Mia felt that she could no longer remain silent. She wanted to tell Nelson how she felt, but she was afraid to destroy the special bond they had built. She saw the way he was looking at her, and she knew that his feelings had also deepened. There was not only friendship in his eyes, but also something that she couldn't help but notice.
Mia, I appreciate our meetings.
He said, looking into her eyes.
They have become very important to me. You helped me feel alive again.
His words touched her to the core. She realized that she wasn't the only one feeling this pull. They were both into it, and it wasn't just friendship. It was something more, something that went beyond the ordinary relationship. Mia couldn't sleep that night. She was thinking about Nelson, about what he had said, and about her own feelings. She knew she had to make a choice, but this choice was incredibly difficult. Her heart was torn between her duty to her husband and the new, exciting feelings she had for Nelson. With each passing day, her affection for Nelson only grew. She felt her heart fill with warmth every time they met. They continued to talk, share their thoughts and feelings, and each time their bond became stronger. Mia realized that Nelson had become more than just a friend to her, but something more. She felt that she had found in him what she had missed so much in her life. Life is about understanding, caring, and a deep emotional connection. She knew that this feeling was real, and she couldn't pretend anymore that it didn't exist. She began to realize that her life with Jaden had become empty and meaningless. She understood that she was attracted to Nelson because he gave her what she could not find in marriage, a sense of fullness of life and emotional intimacy. Mia soon realized that she had to make a choice. She could not continue to live in deception and pretense. She knew that her love for Nelson was real, and she was ready to do anything for this feeling. She decided to be honest with herself and with Jaden, even if it meant ruining her old life. The next time they met in the library, Mia felt ready to open her heart to Nelson. She understood that their relationship would never be simple, but she was willing to risk everything for him. She knew that this man had become the most important thing to her, and she was ready to fight for their love, despite all the difficulties. This day was a turning point in her life. She knew that there were many challenges ahead of them, but she also knew that she had found a man who became everything to her. Mia was ready for any consequences for the sake of this love, and her heart was full of determination and hope for the future. With every day she spent with Nelson, Mia's feelings grew stronger and deeper. Every conversation they had, every look, every moment they spent together made her heart beat faster. At the same time, her thoughts were filled with doubts and guilt. Mia knew that she was attracted to a man who was more than 40 years older than her, and it seemed incredible to her. She was married, and her feelings for Nelson should have been impossible, but every day she realized that she couldn't fight what she was feeling. Mia was often alone with her thoughts in the evenings. She remembered how Nelson smiled at her, how he listened attentively to her, how his eyes shone when he talked about his memories. Her heart was filled with joy and anxiety at the same time. She wanted to forget about her feelings, but they were getting stronger every day. She began to realize that her relationship with Jaden had long since exhausted itself. There was no passion or sincerity in their marriage. Every day they lived as neighbors, shared the same space, but did not share their thoughts and feelings with each other. Jaden was completely absorbed in his work, and he was not interested in what was going on in Mia's life. She felt lonely and detached, and every evening she spent with him seemed empty and meaningless. It was different with Nelson. When they were together, Mia felt alive. Her heart was filled with warmth when he talked about his youth, about how he and his wife Liana spent their evenings dancing to the sounds of jazz. She saw his eyes light up when he recalled those days, and she sensed that he too felt for her something more than just friendship. One evening, after another meeting in the library, Mia couldn't hide her feelings anymore. She was overcome by the desire to be near Nelson, to hear his voice, to see his smile. She found herself thinking that she had fallen in love with him, and this realization stunned her. How could she fall in love with a man who was so many years older than her? How could she betray her husband? These thoughts haunted her. She began to avoid meeting Nelson, trying to cope with her feelings, but it turned out to be more difficult than she thought. She felt her heart torn between her duty to her husband and her passion for Nelson. She couldn't decide which was more important to her, to remain a faithful wife or to follow her feelings. A few days passed, and Mia decided to go to the library again. Her heart was beating faster as she walked through the streets leading to their secret meeting place. She knew she had to talk to Nelson, explain her feelings to him, and understand how he felt about her. When she entered the library, he was already waiting for her, as if he knew she would come.
Mia, I'm glad you came.
He said, walking up to her and holding out his hand.
It's good to see you too, Nelson,
she replied, feeling her voice tremble. They went to their usual place and sat down opposite each other. Mia didn't know how to start a conversation, but she knew she couldn't hide her feelings anymore. She took a deep breath and looked at him.
Nelson, I can't pretend anymore,
she finally said.
I do not know how it happened, but I can't stop thinking about you.
Nelson was silent, his eyes full of understanding and sympathy. He knew it was hard for Mia, and he didn't want to put pressure on her.
I understand, Mia,
he said softly.
You are not alone in your feelings. I can't stop thinking about you either.
These words made her heart beat even faster. She knew that she was attracted to him for more than just friendship. It was more than that, something she couldn't explain. They sat in silence for several minutes, feeling their hearts beating in unison. Mia realized that she couldn't deny her feelings. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't fight what she was feeling anymore. Every day their meetings became more important to her. She began to realize that she had found in Nelson what she had been looking for in her life for so long. He became for her not just a friend, but also a person with whom she could spend the rest of her life. Her heart was filled with love and fear, and she didn't know what to do. Despite her feelings, Mia knew she couldn't keep living a lie. She felt guilty about Jaden, but she also understood that their marriage had long since lost its meaning. She knew she had to make a choice, but this choice was incredibly difficult. One day, returning home after meeting Nelson, she decided to talk to Jaden. Her heart was pounding with fear and excitement, but she knew she had to be honest. When she entered the house, Jaden was sitting on the couch watching TV. He didn't even pay attention to her arrival, completely immersed in his own affairs. Mia sat down next to him, trying to find the right words. Her heart was heavy, and she knew that their conversation would change everything. But before she could say anything, Jaden suddenly turned to her and asked,
You came back early today. Is everything okay?
His question caught her off guard. She hadn't expected such care, and her heart softened for a moment. But then she remembered how she felt about Nelson, and her resolve strengthened. She realized that she couldn't tell Jaden everything right now. Guilt gripped her, and she decided to postpone the conversation. She couldn't ruin her life in one moment. She needed time to think about everything. The next few days were agonizing for Mia. She felt trapped between two worlds, the world she knew and which now seemed alien to her, and the world she was just beginning to discover for herself. Her love for Nelson was like fresh air, but at the same time like a strong storm, ready to destroy everything in its path. She decided to meet with Nelson again to discuss her feelings and figure out what to do next. When they met in the library, her heart was full of doubt and fear, but also hope. She knew she had to be honest with him and with herself.
Nelson, I feel that our attraction is getting stronger,
she said, looking into his eyes.
But I do not know what to do about it. I don't want to hurt Jaden, but I also can't ignore how I feel about you.
Nelson was listening intently to her, his face serious but gentle. He understood that they were at the crossroads of their lives, and he knew that their choice would have consequences for everyone.
Mia, I feel the same way too,
he replied, taking her hand.
I do not know where this road will lead us, but I am ready to walk along it with you if you want it too.
Mia felt her heart fill with warmth from his words. She knew that a difficult path awaited them, but she also understood that she had found a man with whom she was ready to go through everything. She knew that their love was not just a passing infatuation, but something real and deep. Her feelings for Nelson came as a surprise to her, but she could no longer deny their existence. She knew she had to make a choice, and she was willing to take risks in order to be with him. The next day, Mia made a decision. She knew she had to be honest with herself and with Jaden. She decided to talk to him and explain her feelings. Her heart was full of anxiety, but she knew that this was the only right way. When she entered the house, Jaden was in the kitchen cooking dinner. Mia walked up to him. Her hands were shaking, and she could feel her heart beating faster. She knew this conversation would change everything, but she was ready for it. Mia took a deep breath and started talking. She told Jaden about her feelings, how hard it had been for her over the past few years, and how she met Nelson. She explained that she could no longer live in deception and wanted to be honest with herself and with him. Jaden listened to her in silence, his face serious but not angry. He understood that their marriage had long since lost its meaning. and he knew that Mia deserved to be happy. When she finished speaking, he just nodded and said that they needed time to think about everything. That evening, Mia felt a huge weight lifted from her shoulders. She knew that there were many difficulties ahead of them, but she also understood that she had taken the first step towards a new life. Her heart was full of hope and love for Nelson, and she was ready to do anything for their happiness. Her affection for Nelson grew stronger every day. She knew that their relationship would not be easy, but she also understood that she had found something more in him than just a friend. She was ready to fight for their love, despite all the obstacles, and knew that they could overcome everything together. After many doubts and internal struggles, Mia realized that she could no longer fight her feelings for Nelson. Every day she spent away from him seemed endless and empty to her. Despite all her moral principles and obligations to her husband, she was attracted to this elderly man with inexorable force. Their meetings in the library became the air she lived in, but it wasn't enough. She needed more time, more revelations, more touching. They both realized that their feelings had already gone beyond friendship, and one day Mia decided to invite Nelson to meet outside the library. He hesitated at first, realizing the possible consequences of such a step, but deep down he also couldn't resist the desire to spend more time with her. They chose a small cafe in a quiet area of the city, where no one knew them and could not see them. This place became a refuge for them, where they could be themselves, without regard to public opinion. Their first secret date began with a nervous wait. Mia arrived earlier and, sitting at a table in the corner, waited for Nelson to enter the cafe. Her heart was beating faster than usual, and she couldn't figure out what was happening to her. It was excitement mixed with guilt and secret delight. She knew it was wrong, that she was a married woman, but she was attracted to Nelson so much that she couldn't resist it. When Nelson entered the cafe, Mia felt her breath catch in her throat. He looked as calm and confident as ever, but there was something new in his eyes, a spark that was ignited by their forbidden connection. He walked over to her table and their eyes met. They both knew that this was not just a meeting over a cup of coffee, but something more, something that would change their lives forever. Sitting opposite each other, they felt awkward at first. It seemed that the whole cafe was watching them, although in fact no one cared about them. But gradually, the conversations brought back to them the lightness they had always felt with each other. They talked about books, about life, about their dreams and fears. Mia was amazed at how easily she could be herself next to Nelson. She didn't feel the need to pretend or hide her feelings. He was to her who she could have been with Jaden if their relationship hadn't been so distant and cold. With each passing moment, their attraction grew stronger. Mia couldn't stop thinking about how his hand had accidentally touched hers when he was handing her a cup of coffee. Her heart was beating to the beat of his words, and she felt something more than just friendship emerging between them. It was a passionate attraction that she couldn't ignore anymore. After the cafe, they decided to take a walk in the park nearby. The evening was warm and calm, and a light breeze touched their faces, bringing freshness. They walked side by side, not touching each other, but feeling this irresistible connection. At some point they stopped on the bridge, and Mia, looking at the water, felt a wave of emotions sweep over her. She knew she couldn't hold back her feelings any longer, and she turned to Nelson. He looked at her too, and at that moment time seemed to stop. A spark flew between them, and Mia felt her heart reach out to him. She came closer, and their faces were only a few centimeters apart. She could feel his breath, his warmth, and she couldn't resist the urge anymore. Nelson bent down, and their lips met in the first, timid kiss. This kiss opened up a new world for them. A world where there was no place for judgments and rules, where only they and their feelings existed. Mia felt her heart fill with joy and pain at the same time. She knew it was wrong, that she was betraying her husband, but she couldn't stop. Her passion for Nelson was stronger than any moral principles and obligations. From that moment on, their relationship moved to a new level. They began to meet more often, choosing secluded places where no one could see them. Their secret dates became a light for them in the dark days, an opportunity to be themselves and not think about the consequences. Every time they met, their attraction became stronger and their bond deeper. Their romance was filled with passion and tenderness, but also guilt and fear of exposure. Mia understood that her life was turning into a double game, that she lived in two worlds at once, one where she was a married woman, and the other where she was in love with a man who was many years older than her. But she couldn't give up on her feelings. Nelson had become everything to her, and she couldn't imagine her life without him. They spent hours together walking in the park, sitting in a cafe, or just staying at home. Every moment she spent with him was precious to her. She felt that her life was making sense next to him, that she was becoming who she had always wanted to be. She was happy, but that happiness was overshadowed by guilt over Jaden. Mia began to realize that her marriage to Jaden was doomed. She had long since stopped feeling like a part of this union. Their relationship became a formality, an empty shell in which there was no room for love and understanding. Jaden was a good man, but their paths had parted, and they both knew it. Nelson, in turn, also felt that something special was growing between them. He knew it was wrong, but he couldn't stop. Mia became a light for him in the dark days, a reminder that life can still bring joy and love, even at his age. He was willing to do anything to be with her, even if it meant destroying old ties and violating moral principles. But despite all the passion and love, their romance was full of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of condemnation. They knew that their relationship was unacceptable to society, that they violated all rules and norms. But they also knew that they couldn't give up on each other. Their feelings were too strong to ignore. Mia began to think more and more about how her life had changed in recent months. She felt that she was living a double life, that every day was a new lie, a new pretense. She was in love with Nelson, but at the same time she couldn't just leave her old life. She knew she had to make a choice, but this choice was too difficult. Her heart was torn between love and duty. She loved Nelson with all her heart, but she also felt responsible to Jaden and to herself. She didn't know what to do, and every night she fell asleep thinking that their affair could destroy everything she knew and loved. Every day their meetings became more risky. Mia and Nelson began to feel that their secret could be revealed at any moment. But despite this, they could not give up their meetings. Every moment together was priceless for them. They knew that their romance could end in pain and suffering, but they also knew that they couldn't live without it. The forbidden romance between Mia and Nelson continued, despite all the difficulties and fears. Their love was bright and strong, like a flame that could not be extinguished. But at the same time, this flame could burn everything in its path, and they both knew it. They were playing with fire, and no one knew how it would all end. Over the past few months, Jaden has begun to notice changes in the behavior of his wife, Mia. She became more distant and closed, often spent time outside the house, and returned late. He had seen her leave in the morning, but now she was in no hurry to return home in the evening, and if she came, she acted as if she was somewhere far away in her thoughts. Their rare conversations became increasingly shallow and brief. Jaden began to feel that something had changed, something he couldn't explain. Their house, once filled with comfort and laughter, has become cold and empty. It seemed as if an invisible wall had formed between them. Mia looked tired and thoughtful more and more often. She tried to avoid direct gaze. Her smile no longer looked sincere. Jaden tried to talk to her several times, to ask her what happened, but Mia always found excuses, avoided a direct answer, and avoided talking. The feeling of anxiety and worry haunted Jaden. He didn't know what was going on, but he intuitively felt that Mia was hiding something from him. Doubts and suspicions began to arise in his mind. He couldn't believe that Mia, the very woman he loved and trusted, could be deceiving him. But something inside him told him that his fears were not unfounded. One day, after another late return of Mia, Jaden couldn't stand it. He started looking through her phone and noticed that she often corresponded with someone whose name he did not know. The messages were short but regular. This further strengthened his suspicions. He decided that he had to find out the truth, even if it turned out to be painful. The next day, when Mia was about to leave again, Jaden decided to follow her. He pretended to go to work, but actually stayed at home, watching from the window as Mia leaves the house and walks towards the library. He could feel his heart pounding with excitement and fear, but he was determined to find out what was going on. He followed her at a distance, trying not to attract attention. She walked confidently, as if she knew where she was going. When she entered the library, Jaden stopped at the corner and waited. A few minutes later, he saw Mia coming out of the library with an elderly man. He didn't know him, but from the way they looked at each other, It was clear that there was more between them than just friendship. Jaden felt his heart tighten in pain. He couldn't believe what he saw. Mia, his wife, was with another man. They walked side by side, their hands sometimes accidentally touching each other, and there was something in their eyes that left no doubt. It was affection, a closeness that he didn't notice in her eyes when she looked at him. He decided to keep following them, hoping that it would all turn out to be a misunderstanding. But the longer he watched, the more clearly he realized that Mia was cheating on him. They walked through the park and sat on a bench, where they began to talk. Jaden stood in the distance, unable to believe his eyes. He saw how Mia and this man looked at each other with tenderness and warmth, and felt his world crumble. Jaden was in shock. He couldn't understand how this could happen. He was thinking about what they had done wrong, what had gone wrong in their relationship. He began to remember the moments when they were happy together, and wondered where he had gone wrong. But then he saw them together again and realized that now was not the time to look for answers. He had to figure out everything that was going on. When Mia and Nelson got up to continue their walk, Jaden decided he couldn't hide anymore. He approached them, feeling his anger and pain overwhelm him. Mia didn't notice him at first, but then her gaze met his and her face paled. She realized that her secret had been revealed, and her heart was filled with horror. Jaden couldn't contain his emotions. He came closer and demanded an explanation. Mia, stunned and scared, tried to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. She didn't know what to do. Her world began to crumble right before her eyes. She saw such pain in Jaden's eyes that she had never seen before, and her heart clenched with guilt and shame. Nelson, seeing what was happening, realized that their affair had been discovered. He felt guilty for causing other people to suffer, but he knew that nothing could be changed. Mia looked at him, hoping to find support, but she knew that this would not change the situation. She was torn between feeling guilty about Jaden and her feelings for Nelson. Jaden couldn't contain his pain and anger anymore. He expressed everything that had accumulated in his soul, accused Mia of betrayal and lies. His voice trembled as he spoke, and his eyes were full of tears. He couldn't believe that the woman he loved had done this to him. Mia stood with her head down, unable to look into his eyes. Her heart was bursting with pain and shame. She did not know what to say or how to explain her actions. She knew she had made a mistake, but she also knew that her feelings for Nelson were real and deep. When Jaden finished speaking, he just stood there and looked at her, waiting for an answer. But Mia couldn't find the words. She knew that no words could undo what she had done. She knew that her actions had ruined their marriage, and she felt that her world was crumbling right under her feet. After Jaden left, Mia stayed where she was, unable to move. She was stunned by what had happened and couldn't believe that her life had changed so quickly and so dramatically. Her heart was full of pain, and she felt lost and lonely. She knew she had to make a decision. Her love for Nelson was real, but she also knew that she had hurt Jaden and ruined their marriage. Her soul was torn apart, and she didn't know what to do next. Several days after this incident passed in a fog. Mia was trying to figure out what had happened and how to move on. She knew that her choice would not be easy, no matter what she decided. But she also knew that she couldn't go back. Her life had changed, and she needed to find a way to move forward. Every day she realized more and more that her feelings for Nelson were real and deep. She knew that their relationship would not be easy, but she also understood that she could not live without him. Her heart was filled with love and pain, and she knew she had to make a choice. Mia realized that she had to be honest with herself and with Jaden. She decided that she could no longer live in lies and pretense. She knew that her choice would be painful and difficult, but she also understood that this was the only way to real happiness. Her decision was made. She decided to leave everything behind and go ahead with Nelson. She knew that difficulties awaited them, but she also understood that she had found in him not only passion, but also real support and understanding. Their love was worth fighting for, and she was ready to move forward no matter what. After Jaden found out the truth about Mia's affair with Nelson, the world she knew began to crumble. Their house, once filled with comfort and tranquility, has turned into an arena of silence and uncertainty. Jaden was depressed, his heart was broken, and he couldn't understand how the woman he loved could do this. Mia saw in his eyes a mixture of pain, betrayal and disappointment. She understood that her action had caused him a deep wound that might never heal. It was time for Mia to make a choice. She was facing two paths, each leading to a completely different life. On the one hand, there was Jaden, her husband, with whom she had lived for many years, their common history, and their home. On the other hand, there was Nelson, a man for whom she had feelings she had never felt before. Their romance was forbidden, but in it she found what she had been missing for so long: passion, support, understanding. Mia began to reflect on what her past with Jaden had meant to her. They went through a lot of good things together, but over time their relationship turned into a formality in which there was no sincerity or intimacy left. She realized that there was no room for real feelings in their marriage anymore. This realization came to her when she compared her emotions next to Jaden and Nelson. Nelson's gaze, his words, and his touch made her feel alive and loved. Despite all this, the decision was not an easy one. She knew that if she left Jaden, she would be judged and misunderstood by her family and friends. Society could turn away from her, seeing her act as treason and betrayal. She also understood that her connection with Nelson, despite the depth of her feelings, would face many obstacles. Their age difference, social stereotypes, and disapproval of their surroundings could be the stones that could easily be tripped over. However, Mia couldn't ignore what she was feeling. She decided to listen to her heart. That evening, after much thought and tears, she decided to talk to Jaden frankly. She knew she had to be honest with him and with herself, no matter how painful this conversation would be. When they sat down at the table to talk, the atmosphere was heavy and tense. Mia looked into Jaden's eyes, seeing in them the pain she had caused. It was difficult for her to start, but she knew it was necessary. She explained that she no longer felt part of their marriage, that her heart no longer belonged to him. She talked about her feelings for Nelson, about how he helped her feel alive again. Jaden listened to her in silence. He didn't expect to hear what he heard. His face was expressionless, but there was deep pain in his eyes. When Mia finished, he was silent for a long time, and then quietly said that she needed to do what she thought was right for herself. He didn't know if he would ever be able to forgive her, but he understood that keeping her close when her heart belonged to another was pointless. Mia felt relief mixed with bitterness. It hurt her to realize that she was hurting someone who had once been close to her, but she also knew that she was making the right choice for herself. After that conversation, she packed up and left the house that had been her refuge for so many years. She left everything behind, deciding to start a new chapter in her life. It was different with Nelson. When she arrived at his place, her heart was beating faster than ever. He met her on the doorstep, and when he saw her, he realized that she had made her choice. There was anxiety in his eyes, but also determination. He knew that difficulties awaited them, but he was ready to go forward with her, despite everything. Their first days together were filled with joy and fear. They understood that a difficult path awaited them. Nelson's family was puzzled by his choice. The children, who had been living their own lives for a long time, could not understand why their father, an elderly man, decided to take such a step. They didn't know how to accept the young woman who broke into their family and their father's heart. Friends and acquaintances didn't understand them either. Some of them turned away from Nelson, considering his act stupid and inappropriate for his age. Mia also faced condemnation and disapproval. She lost several friends who could not understand her choice and believed that she had ruined her marriage for the sake of a fleeting passion. However, despite all the difficulties, they were happy. Their love was a source of strength for them, and they were ready to fight for their happiness. Every day they learned to understand each other even more, to accept the difference in age and life experience. Mia found in Nelson the wisdom and calmness that helped her cope with difficulties, and he found in her youth and energy a new hope for the future. Mia started working at the local library where they once met, and found a job in it that brought her pleasure. She felt closer to Nelson when she was surrounded by books and the peace they always brought her. This place has become a symbol of their love and the beginning of a new life. Their relationship faced many obstacles. They faced misunderstanding and condemnation. But every time they were together, all these problems receded into the background. Their home became a place where they could be themselves, where they could laugh, cry and love each other without regard for the opinions of others. Mia and Nelson understood that their lives would not be easy, but they were ready to walk this path together. They knew that their love was not just a passing infatuation, but a deep and true bond that was worth fighting for. They decided not to pay attention to the opinion of society, but to follow their hearts, knowing that they had made the right choice. Their bond grew stronger every day. They spent evenings together reading books or just talking, sharing their thoughts and dreams. They started traveling together, discovering new places and enjoying every moment spent together. Mia realized that she had found in Nelson not only passion, but also a true friend, a partner who supports her and helps her grow. He became a source of inspiration for her, a man who opened up a world of possibilities for her and showed that love has no age. They decided together that they would not allow society or stereotypes to dictate to them how to live. Their love was sincere and real, and they saw no reason to give it up because of prejudice. Together they walked a new path full of uncertainty, but also hope for the future. Despite all the difficulties they had gone through, Mia and Nelson knew they had made the right choice. They were ready to fight for their happiness, for their love, and they were not going to give up. Their story was not only about forbidden passion, but also about the power of love, which overcomes all obstacles and makes you go forward no matter what.